Welcome to Sci-Fi Book Trek.
Cut to the fucking title. So, today we are looking at one of the
Star Trek books.
We'll probably have to start.
One in a trilogy. We've just started this at random, so we've just picked this one to start with. And it's Star Trek Destiny. Gods of Night. Written by David Mack. And it was first published in 2008.
So it is actually much later than any of the series.
Yes.
Pretty much in the drought period between...
I think it 1 year before the JJ film comes out?
Yeah, because the JJ film was 2009.
Yes. So it's just before then.
Which, considering the story, I think this could have been certainly a better resolution to the TNG films, but that remains to be seen.
Well, yes, but I also think it might be a bit too convoluted for a film.
It does require an awful lot of prior knowledge.
Yes, I think if someone tried to film this, they would, just the first book, they would split up into probably 2 films.
I mean, we are talking about the time period where they were splitting up all the Harry Potter films, so...
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but, yes. So
I mean, what was your first thoughts on it? Just the first book.
Just the first book, I kind of like it. I've obviously read this quite a while ago compared to yourself.
Well, I mean, we should mention you've read more Star Trek than I have.
Yes.
I've probably read more sci-fi.
Yeah.
Broader sci-fi.
Hard sci-fi, I suppose.
Well, yeah, and not much Star Trek.
Mm.
I've read, I think, 2 books.
Whereas I have quite a lot. In fact, David Mack has written quite a few other Star Trek works in his time. So this story is part 1 of a conclusion to quite a few of the... Well, certainly it's a conclusion to the Borg. As far as it explains a lot of the information. As far as the trilogy is concerned...
3 books in total.
It brings a fairly... For me, good conclusion to the Borg story. It gives a genuinely good reason as to why certain things happen. And while I don't necessarily agree with the idea of a Borg queen, which is, something that I've disputed ever since First Contact came out, there is at least an argument to explain why that is. But that doesn't come until.
But yes, the first book, however, the Borg are, I wouldn't even say a B plot, I would say a C plot. They are in the background doing stuff, but they're sort of cut in every so often. And
just to keep the threat alive.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, it's always been one of those background plot holes where it's, okay, well, the Borg want to take over humanity, but all they ever do is send one ship.
Well, yes.
That is not a thing in these books.
Yes, however, in these books they have different questions.
True.
Because some of it initially does not feel like the Borg. I mean, I've only read the first book, but initially this does not feel like the Borg out of the series so much.
Again,
this feels like a more emotional, mean-spirited version rather than the collective.
I mean, and again, it comes down to some of the interpretations on the Borg over the entire run of Star Trek in general, because TNG gave you this impression that it was a group, a hive mind that worked together for a common goal. Once the Borg Queen was introduced, that then became a single focal point, and that everything else was basically subservient to the one thing.
Well, yes, but even then, it still felt they were rational.
Yes.
And it still felt like, it felt like the Borg Queen was more a mouthpiece of the collective rather than the supreme ruler.
For First Contact, yes, to a degree. But then when you get into some of the later Voyager episodes, there's definitely a feeling that the Queen has suddenly become, for all intents and purposes, a Saturday morning cartoon villain. And she does act, rather than acting out of logic or any sort of plan, it does seem to be plans made out of malice. It does seem to be plans made out of revenge. And it was one of the things that does not suit, for me at least, it does not suit the Borg as a concept.
Yeah, it sort of lessens them in some way. It makes them less of a threat.
But that is partially what has been continued in these books, is that even though I might not necessarily agree with the direction the Borg took when it got to First Contact, when it got to Voyager, the books have at least tried to continue what was laid down. It's not like Mack has basically gone, well, because if it was me writing, I've got to admit, I would probably go, the Borg Queen was an aberration. It doesn't exist.
But then again, as clear on the back, CBS would not have hired you to do that.
True enough. That said, I mean, Star Trek Picard. But let's leave that for today.
Which I haven't seen. I've not seen any of the new Star Trek series.
We're talking, I think, we'll talk about the book.
This was before JJ, so this was the actual Star Trek canon. But yes, the book itself, like I say, the Borg are in the background, and they're mostly,
at least for the first one,
used as like chapter segments, just to like, meanwhile, this is happening.
It's the background looming threat. It is the proverbial ticking clock situation.
Yeah, the main mystery, because he's a mystery at the heart of this book. It's the main mystery is involving the NX-02 Columbia.
Yes, and Captain Hernandez, who does actually feature in Enterprise. I believe we see her a couple of times. You've not watched much of Enterprise, have you?
I've watched a few episodes, but I can't say I recall the one you're on about.
Captain Hernandez essentially wants it's into the Xindi arc, where so that's season 3, I believe, season 3 or season 4 of Enterprise, where they rebooted the show to go with the Xindi arc, and Enterprise returns home, And the NX-02, the Columbia, is the ship that essentially defends them when they get back to Earth. Because they're being chased by a Klingon ship. And it's Captain Hernandez at
So is this when it's just got out of space dock?
Pretty much. It hasn't moved much beyond Earth's...
Columbia disappears on its maiden flight.
Mm.
And then when this would be, I think, a few months before the Dominion War, when the main cast of Deep Space Nine are on the Defiant, running about the Gamma Quadrant, just having a look, they come across the
Columbia,
the shell of the Columbia, crashed on a desert planet. Mm. And this happens, well, it's supposed to happen a week after the episode, let me just look it up. A week after the episode, Children of Time.
Yes. Which
is the one, what is it, Series 5, episode 22, I think it
down. It's a particular episode where, if I remember correctly, the Defiant ends up crash landing on a planet. Yes. And it's a colony of the survivors from that crash.
Yes. The plot seemed to be inspired by the Lost in Space remake. Mm. None of that really matters for the book. It just happens a week after that. Mm. And they find the Columbia. Before they can really do anything, Jem'Hadar show up, so they have to
escape.
Get out. Yeah. They have to go back to Deep Space Nine, and then war happens. Jadzia dies. So Ezra Dax comes back after a war.
Esri.
Yeah. I thought it was Ezra.
No. Ezra. Okay. Ezra's a bloke's name.
You sure? Okay. Yes, pronunciation is going to be a problem. So, write down in the comments why we can't pronunciate things.
Why we can't pronunciate. Shaka
Ezra
when the walls fell.
Comes back years after, once the war's over, and starts to investigate again. This is happening just about while the Borg start invading.
Interesting side note to that, the Counselor has now got command of a starship. Which is, yes, she's the captain.
She's a counselor?
Ezri Dax.
I didn't know she was a counselor.
Ezri Dax in Deep Space Nine is a counselor. She's in the
I didn't get that far. I kind of tuned off when the war happened.
Yeah.
I didn't know she was a counselor. Yeah, I thought she was an ensign initially.
Forget.
But anyway, yeah, she has command of the ship, the Aventine.
Yes.
And so she's captain, and she decides, I'm not going to go fight the Borg. I'm going to go to the Gamma Quadrant, where there's no threat, and scan this mysterious ship I found.
She's quite literally playing an incredibly massive hunch.
Yes.
And bear in mind that the Aventine is supposed to be, or at least in the context of the story, the Aventine is supposed to be one of the newest ships.
It's a Vesta class.
Yeah.
750 crew.
But it's also, like I say, it's top of the line. It's better supposedly, than the Enterprise,
yes.
the Sovereign class. So the idea that they've taken this ship, which is the pride of the fleet, and they've gone, yeah, you fight the Borg. We're going to go and take...
I think that there's only 2 sister ships operating, and they're helping defending certain quadrants.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it's all under the premise that because the Federation doesn't know how the Borg are getting into Federation space.
Yes, certainly not in the numbers.
Yeah, and because it's not totally behind enemy lines, but they are just appearing roughly in the middle of the Federation rather than on the outskirts. So Esri Dax has decided to take the Avatine to go check out the wreck of the Columbia to see if they can work out how it got to the Gamma Quadrant, hoping that it has some connection with how the Borg are managing to get inside Federation space.
Yes. Like I say, it's a massive, massive hunch play, and they even acknowledge that much.
I mean, I could probably understand if they weren't on one of the new powerful ships. Federation letting them do this. But because it's one of the new powerful ships, it's also, I know they're struggling for captains. I don't understand why they promoted her, then are instantly going, oh yes, you want to do a little jaunt, by all means go ahead.
Yes.
Because we trust you as a seasoned captain. It's
when we're in the middle of a crisis situation,
and also
against the Federation's biggest enemy.
And she's not been the captain. She's been the captain for maybe a week before putting in this request.
Yeah.
So that's a little hard to believe, but the heart of the mystery, the main plot of the book revolves around the Columbia. It's a mystery of how did it get there, when it went it disappeared 200 years ago on its maiden voyage. And to some extent, it wraps it up all within this book. It answers that. It asks that question, and it answers it at the end. You know exactly how it got from A to B, and all the journey in between.
You've got 4 different perspectives that the story is taking. Yeah. Well, I say 4.
It happens. There's many threads, and it pulls, especially the ones with the Columbia together, or it connects them with other events going on. Hoping to set up for the next 2 books.
Yeah. But you've got the 4, I believe it's 4 major perspectives. So you've got Esri on the Aventine.
Yeah.
You've got Picard on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
You have Hernandez on the Columbia.
Yeah.
And that's in a different time zone altogether.
Point in time.
Yes.
It's 200 years before.
And you have Riker on the Titan.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, I would argue that initially, in the first book, the Picard bit is probably I wouldn't say weakest, but it's the least of all of those. A lot happen on those other ships, and you learn about the Picard on the Enterprise. Yeah. You don't really get much.
No, I agree, because a lot of what the Enterprise is basically doing is literally just a Borg ship pops up,
yes,
and it goes and it fights the Borg ship, and that's basically the extent.
It feels like it's setting up. It's there because it's setting up what's going to happen in the next 2 books, rather than being a plot line in this book.
again, from my perspective, I've read all 3.
Yeah, I've only read 1.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping some stuff gets answered. Otherwise, I'm going to think the Picard stuff's a waste in the book. There's some sort of juxtaposition going on between what's happening to Picard and what's happening to Riker initially. And that's all I'll hint at.
Mm.
But then that seems to go nowhere. And I would say the Picard sections gives the main word of this whole book, which is brooding. Because every time Picard's on, it mentions that he's brooding about something. And then there's other parts which other people are brooding. It seems to be the word that David Mack has chose.
Yes.
And for some reason, it just kept on popping up. I kept on noticing it more than any other word.
As far as characterization is concerned, would you say, or at least the characters that you know, would you say that they're following on from the characters that have been established? I mean, obviously, you don't know Esri.
Because I know. No. I mean, everyone seemed mostly fine. I mean, it's hard to say because Riker and Troy are going through some things. But they seemed like the same characters.
Mm.
Picard, I'm not sure on. I can't decide whether he's the captain he was, or he's just.
Okay.
He's just an old misery guts, and he can only see failure.
Put it from this perspective, then, would you say that he follows the? You know how there's the tale of 2 Picards, the old red letter media argument of you've got show Picard and you've got movie Picard.
Yeah, which is a fact.
Yeah, but would you say
I would say he fits more into the show Picard rather than the movie Picard. Yeah. He's really like in this book, but
he's still a miserable.
Yeah, it does feel. It feels the fingerprints of first contact. Picard.
There's the
he does feel like an old man telling the Borg to get off his lawn.
There is the episode literally after Best of Both Worlds, the one where he goes home to France and he meets up with his brother, and his brother's an absolute cunt.
Oh yes, I think I might have seen that one.
But there is the point where his stoicism as a captain breaks down. It's kind of tapping into that character. And there's that misery that maybe it's re-triggering old feelings.
I would agree with that. But yeah, I do think it's more serious Picard than movie Picard.
No, I would agree.
I think everyone else is, roughly the series versions. I mean, they've moved on, but they're still that. And, there are appearances of other people who have been in series. There's, what's her name? What is it? Melora Paslar?
Melora Paslar.
Yes.
She's the stellar cartographist who ends up on an episode of Deep Space Nine.
Yes.
The lady in the wheelchair.
Yeah, who comes from a planet where gravity's low.
Yes.
Yes. She's Elasian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Elasian.
I believe that's it. Yeah, Elasian.
I'll probably have to check the Deep Space Nine video to see if that's how they pronounce it, but I think it is correct.
Ensign Melora Pazlar is the first Elasian to join Starfleet.
But yeah, the Titan, or a lot of the characters that are featured in the Titan are after a set of books, so there's a bit more fleshing out of.
That was another thing. Worf appears on the Titan. No, Worf appears on the Enterprise. Yeah, but he's gone from Deep Space Nine back onto the Enterprise.
Yes,
I mean he's like the right position, like second in charge.
Yeah, because this is also after Nemesis.
I mean, there are some other things that I could nitpick around, but that would go into spoiler territory. So we'll finish up here. Overall, I think this is a good read. It's a fine little book. It sets up a mystery. It solves a mystery. It gives some threads about going on to the second book or the third. But initially, you can read this and be satisfied.
Yeah.
It feels like having a starter and main course, but no dessert.
Yeah.
It's like, it'll do. It's fine. It's fair enough.
It's a strong starter for the story.
Yes.
It does set up what you need to know, even if you haven't watched, or rather, even if you haven't read any of the other material, there is still enough information there that you're not necessarily going to get lost.
Yes. I mean, it does clue you into some things that have happened before. Occasionally I'll mention some things, and you don't have to know.
Yeah. For instance,
but like it's little things like
for instance, if I said the Teswa conflict.
Well, yeah, or the Kittimer. Like there's planet Kittimer is in it. And if you know about that, you know about that.
But
if not, and like the Battle of Nerinja 3 is mentioned, and if you know, like that's all it is. It's just a little mention, and then it's moved on. You don't really need to know what it is, but if you do, you know, it just adds a little more flavour, but it's not essential.
Yeah. I do hope that you'll be pleasantly surprised by the next book, and hopefully with the conclusion as well.
I must admit, I am slightly worried.
Tentatively wary.
I'm tempted. Like the parts I liked in it were the bits it did. Like the mystery on the Columbia and stuff like that. I liked that aspects the most. The other aspects I wasn't fully engaged in.
There is a lot of there's a lot of built up for the story that will feature in the next book.
Yeah, I'm slightly worried, maybe too much of a stronger word, but for want of a better one, I'm a bit worried about the next two, especially seeing as I know there's two. That would, but I don't know. I'll have to see what they're like when I read them, and hopefully I'll tell you.
Welcome to Sci-Fi Book Trek. God damn it.
I'm sorry. Okay. We can do it together.